Hello, everybody out there in UK Crime Bookland. I'm here with Jane Harper to talk about her latest book, Survivors. Hi, Jane.
Hello, hi everyone.
If you could tell us a bit about the plot, please, Jane.
Yeah, sure. So, The Survivors is another Australian mystery. This time it's set along the rugged coastline of Tasmania, which is a small island state in Australia. So it has lots of small town intrigue and secrets to be unearthed. And it follows the main character, who's a young guy called Kieran Elliott, who is a new father. And he returns to his hometown, a small coastal community, to help his aging parents. And he's barely had time to arrive and brush the sand off his boots when a body is discovered on the beach.
So what made you decide to set this one on a beach? Because it's a different setting to what your other books have been.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, the setting comes really early in the planning process. When I'm thinking about the plot, I'm also trying to think, what kind of setting is going to really support the story. I like to also do something a little bit different with each book, rather than kind of revisit maybe the same locations. And so I knew really early on that I wanted this to be coastal setting. And then from there, Tasmania was a really natural choice. It's got that, because it's an island state, it's quite small, it's got a small population. So it has kind of already that kind of sort of natural advantage of being a little bit cut off and a bit isolated, anyway. It has, amazing kind of scenery and coastline, and it has a lot of those really small communities where, you get kind of the influx of tourists for a few months over the summer, and then they kind of all disappear and it's just the locals left. So it had that was the kind of perfect mix that I was looking for the Survivors.
How common are storms over there? Because the storm is a key part of the book.
Yeah, I mean, Tasmania is in the south, is the most southernmost sort of state in Australia, so they get the kind of the four seasons and the sort of the cooler weather, I guess. So they and I guess being an island as well, they get the kind of the weather coming off the sea. So I think it is, those kind of storms are a bit more common in that area. But the storm, I guess, that's one of the key kind of points in the book is a bit of an exceptional event in itself as well, which in its turn it sort of, it throws the locals even off, takes them by surprise really, which is kind of the catalyst for all sorts of things after that.
I read this back in November when it was released on ebook and audio, so it's a while since I read it, but you released it in Australia first. You were saying before about how COVID has changed the way you've been touring with it. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So when it came out in Australia at the end of September in print, it was I live in Melbourne, and we were in the kind of midst of a really hard lockdown in our states, which went on for I think it was going to be 6 weeks originally, and I think we were maybe week 14 at that point. So it was quite a different experience, because normally, as you guys would know, when a book comes out, the author goes around and does bookshop visits and all kinds of things, and there was none of that, because much like you guys, our retail shops were all closed, and we had to stay at home 23 hours a day, and so there's a lot of Zoom events. But it was quite weird, because the rest of Australia was open. It was just my state, so I kept getting photos of people in bookshops and things, but I didn't see the book in a bookshop until about 6 weeks after it had come out. It was this very sort of theoretical kind of release in a way, but we were saying just before, I think one of the real benefits though has been the opportunity to do online events, because I think you kind of have the opportunity to kind of reach readers, I guess, who maybe wouldn't get the chance to go to in-person events. And I think myself, I know I've discovered a lot of authors through doing online events that I maybe wouldn't have gone to an in-person event because I didn't know enough about them. But you discover something new just by being able to kind of tune in from your phone on the couch, basically.
Who would you say the biggest person you discovered while doing that is?
I don't know. There were quite a lot of There were quite a lot of them. I mean, a lot of kind of Australian authors, I guess, when I was tuning into, different bookshops and things, just to get a feel for how these events
Yeah,
went.
yeah,
Um, I mean, one that I really enjoyed. I was already aware of her work, but she wrote. It's an author called Kate Mildenhall, who's an Australian writer whose first book was historic fiction, and whose second book was this kind of speculative dystopia set in the very near future. Called The Mother Fault, which I don't know if it's out in the UK yet, but when it does come out, I thought it was a really good read. It's not
yeah.
strictly a crime thriller book, but it was very gripping. So things like that, where books that, I think it's just things like that. You sort of discover books you maybe, otherwise might not have really come across.
Um, when I was preparing for this interview, I managed to um, um, finish his second Aaron Falk book, which was very similar to The Lost Man because it both involved lost people. Why did you decide to use similar plot lines in those two books? I know that probably wasn't intentional, but yeah.
Um,
Just,
well, I actually don't think they are very similar. I think those books, I would say those books are quite different in the
yeah,
approach. I mean, for me, and Force of Nature, it's more about a woman who's missing. She's gone missing
yeah,
during this corporate retreat. So the question is really what's happened to her, and how much do her colleagues who were in there with her in this bushland on this corporate retreat, how much do they know, and how much are they telling about what really happened over those 4 days? Whereas with The Lost Man, which is set in outback Queensland, that's a very sort of specific part of Australia. It's quite unique to itself, and I think the thing that really sort of drew me to that story was this question of this man who's one of three brothers who's found who's found dead, in the opening prologue, really. And the question is more why he ended up in that position, given that he knows the land and he knows the dangers involved in being in such a hot, isolated region. How did he manage to get himself into this position, and was it deliberate? So I think I mean, in a way, you could say, every crime book is the same, and everybody, they will have a murder or a crime being committed. But I think for me, the execution and the kind of the question around those two books was quite different.
yeah. It's probably because I read them in reverse order that I noticed a slight similarity, I think. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I suppose also um, for me, the Lost Man was my first standalone novel. So the first two books are Dry and Force of Nature
yeah,
both have Aaron Falk in it, who is a federal investigator, and then The Lost Man was a standalone. But at the same time, I also wanted that book to feel, in a similar tone and feel to the other books. So even though it didn't have the same recurring character, it still felt like one of my novels. And it was, if you enjoyed the first two, you would also enjoy the style of that one.
yeah. When it came to writing The Storm, the second standalone, what did you learn from writing The Lost Man that you brought into that?
I think in terms of standalones, I actually, I think that's something that works quite well with my style, because the way I sort of structure a book when I'm doing the early planning stages is the plot comes first for me, specifically actually the resolution. So rather than think about the start, I'm thinking more about that kind of end point where the mystery, whatever it is resolved, and you've got characters who've been brought to an extreme situation. And the question for me is, how have those people been brought to this point? Is it something, in their backgrounds? Is it spontaneous? Is it something like a long held grudge? Is it something kind of a spur of the moment thing? But what has led them to this point? And then from there, I'm sort of building out the kind of the ideas and the threads of the plot. And that's where I start to think about what characters are going to really tell the story in the best way. And I think it's so important to have the best characters to tell the story, the best possible way. So with standalones, I think you can build the characters specifically for that plot, and design them and their personalities and their backgrounds and their whole kind of, way of looking at things, to help guide the reader through this specific story.
As you came originally from the UK, what was it like writing Australian teenagers in the early parts of the Survivor book?
Yeah, I mean, I was born in the UK, but I actually did live in Australia for quite a few years when I was younger. So I lived here in Australia between the ages of 8 and 14. So I did have some experience of, going to high school here and, in the 90s and kind of, sort of being part of that culture, I suppose. And then when I moved back to England, I think something that has always struck me is I think teenagers have, similar have similar ways about them the world over. As teenage experiences are often, echoed, I think, wherever you live. So so I was able to I think kind of draw on both those things to hopefully, portray those characters in that particular timeline when we're reflecting on their younger selves authentically. And also I think I wanted to really capture that feeling of being older and looking back on your younger self and how your perception changes with a bit of maturity and a few years experience under your belt, how things that you completely, believed and accepted when you were younger can take on quite a different complexion when you revisit them as an adult.
Yeah. I found that bit really intriguing because of the way you split the story and the present day and past in the in the same book. How is that as a style? Because you also did that in Force of Nature too, splitting.
Yeah, I think, I think for me, I do quite like to look back at kind of, I guess, the origins of people's behavior and what's, like I was saying, for what's led them to this moment. And a lot of that, the answers to those questions can often be found in, I guess, experiences or relationships or betrayals, in the years gone by. So, I think that's something a lot of us can relate to in terms of, looking back over the past and seeing how it's kind of shaped our present lives. And I think the characters are no exception to that. And I guess the question I always just ask myself really when I'm writing the books is what's the best way to do that? So, for example, in Force of Nature, I split the chapters. So there was a chapter in the past and a chapter in the present. In The Dry, I used kind of flashback scenes because I felt that's helped bring those scenes to life more than just people sitting in, living rooms or the pub kind of recounting to each other what happened. In Lost Man and Survivors, I've done more of a kind of internal reflection with the character. I think because that sort of mimics the way that people tend to reflect on their own lives. It's more of a kind of internal process triggered by something you see. So that was you see or think or, a conversation you're having. So that was kind of how I chose to do it in each of those books.
Going back to the very start with The Dry, what do you think will happen when the film comes out and the images will change with the film as well? How do you think you'll
Yes.
see that?
So the film has actually come out in Australia now. So it came out here on New Year's Day because our cinemas have reopened here now. So it came out New Year's Day, and it's going it's going amazingly. Actually, it's had the best opening of an independent Australian film ever, and it's well into, I think, like the top 30 Australian films of all time in terms of its takings. And it's, I don't know, it's been like 3 weeks, I guess. So it's going really well. It beat Wonder Woman at the box office the last couple of weeks, which was, a big deal for us. So that was good.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that there's a couple of things about the film. I mean, I love the film. I think I didn't write it myself. The script was done by the director Robert Connolly, who also wrote the screenplay. But there's a couple of things that I think really work so well for it is that they went out and they filmed in the region where The Dry was set. So geographically, it's completely spot on. A lot of the locals were involved. A lot of them play extras and, kind of let their houses out to be filmed in and things. So the scenery is really, really perfect. And Eric Bana, who plays Aaron Falk, he's a really beloved Australian actor over here, certainly. And I think that was when I heard they were interested in casting him. I mean, physically, he's quite different from Aaron Falk in the books, but I think the main thing for me was having someone who could kind of have that sort of spirit of the character that would make people warm to him and want to follow him through this journey. And I think Eric Bana has absolutely captured that perfectly. And the response I have to say from audiences, those who've read the books and those who haven't, has been like overwhelmingly positive. Like they really have embraced him as a character. And I've got a lot of really, really great feedback about him. So so I'm really happy. It's a fantastic film. I hope you guys get a chance to see it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I'm sure we will in the future because I used to go and see a lot of films, and after I saw it in Nottingham, we planned to go and see it. So I'm hoping that it comes out soon.
I think the producers, I know they're in talks at the moment with like international distributors, like in the UK and the US, and I think it's done so well in the Australian box office. I think money always talks, and I think they'll, feeling pretty confident that they'll find a good platform for it, whatever that may be, streaming or cinema or whatever, is going to kind of give it a good showing, I guess. So watch this space. I'll keep things updated on social media and stuff as and when I hear things anyway.
Yeah, because of the demand for it, do you think you'll end up writing another Aaron Falk book?
Yeah, I think I will, but not because of that. I think you can never really. I think sort of no matter how well a film does, I don't think you can ever kind of bet on like another film being made. Made Up Stories, who are the producers behind The Dry, a woman called Bruna Papandreou, who was also behind Big Little Lies, the adaptation of the Liane Moriarty novel. So they have character rights over Falk, so they also have the rights to Force of Nature, and they would have the rights to any future book. And so I think it's definitely something that would kind of be, I guess, on all of our radar. But at the same time, so many things have to happen. Like the stars have to align in such a way that I think you can't be sure that anything will ever happen in terms of an adaptation. So I would always do what I can, know what I know I can control, which is the books. I can, always try and write the best book I can, using the best character for that story and execute it. And for me, the books are always enough. It doesn't matter to me if they don't get adapted. Like I write books because I want to write books. So I think, having said that, I think I will return to Falk. I think it's just a question of finding the right storyline for him. But it's something I have been thinking about quite a lot lately, and I have got a bit of an idea that I think could be really good for him and give his character sort of kind of space to breathe. And so watch this space. It is something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, because having just read Force of Nature, I was really curious because I wondered because of his specialism being financial crime, it's very difficult to come up with like half a dozen stories for a series, I would have thought. And that's probably,
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think because because he's not a homicide detective, and that was a deliberate choice. In The Dry, I didn't want him to be someone who was going to kind of roll into town and show the idiot local cop how it was done. I wanted him to be as uncomfortable in this situation as the local sergeant, who was also kind of dropped into the deep end. And so he's not sort of a natural and that he wasn't a natural fit for investigating what was happening in The Dry, but he was there because of his personal connections. I think it's kind of if you're going to bring a character back, for me, I think I always want to be careful it's not sort of turning into a kind of Murder, She Wrote type situation where he sort of stumbles across the body every time he steps out of his house. I think it absolutely, as you said, has to be the right kind of fit for the character and something that feels like authentic and natural for his situation.
Just after reading that, family dynamics seem to have been a key part of your like B story throughout all 4 books. Why do you think that is important to your writing style?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I'm sort of setting up the plot and the characters and the relationships, the primary concern really is reflecting, I guess, accurate and believable communities of people. And so that I think inevitably involves some family relationships. I mean, some people, I think a lot of people have those. I mean, families are a big part of our lives, and for most of us, and they do a bit of a driving force in our decisions, and they certainly kind of help shape who we have become as adults. So I think a big part of it is just the fact that is the way of life, really, in terms of our family's influences on a lot of us. um, and then I think, so that's kind of maybe I guess the creative reason. From a technical point of view, I find as well, if you've got, a cast of characters, you're having to introduce them all to the reader, one by one, and make sure the reader understands who they are and what their relationship is with the other characters. And sometimes an easy way to sort of fix people in the reader's mind is for people to be related, because you can make certain assumptions about relatives that you can't necessarily make with friends. So if people are brothers, for example, that they will probably have, unless you sort of state otherwise, they're probably going to have a shared upbringing. They're going to have a shared personal history. They're going to have, parents in common, siblings in common. They're going to have had similar experiences growing up. And so they're probably going to have something of the same view of the world to a certain degree. And that is a relationship you can kind of give the reader a little bit of a shortcut to understanding who these people are. Whereas with friends, for example, or colleagues, there's 1,000 different types of friend and colleague relationships you can have, from very close to very distant. And I know that can be true with siblings as well, but I think often when you have family members, you can fix people in readers' minds a little bit more clearly, I find.
I found that really did work really well with all the books, particularly important with this latest one because of the dementia angle. Did you have to do a bit, a fair bit of research for that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I always do try and I always do quite a lot of research for the books, both kind of on the ground visits to location, which I did in this case, as with all the books, but also I think recognizing when kind of themes and certain character traits are emerging, making sure that they're handled sensitively and accurately, and part of that would involve speaking to professionals in those fields to try, to make sure that the characters are kind of reflecting, things as they are. So yeah, so I spoke to people around that. I actually also have like elderly relatives myself who have, sadly been through that kind of dementia themselves. And I also spoke as well, actually, for the younger people. I spoke to someone from a prominent mental health charity over here in Australia, one of the lead psychologists, about the impacts of kind of grief and guilt and family pressure from having an aging parent, and regrets of the past and things, and what that particularly has on a young person, and young men in particular, going forward, and the kind of pitfalls that they need to be aware of. So all that stuff is, whenever you do research, is always a little bit cherry picking, because you don't want to overload the reader. You don't want to slow down the plot for the sake of the research, but it's about, I think, having that background knowledge yourself, and then be able to kind of weave it through in a way, through the characters' kind of interactions.
Both that and Last Man, the research seemed very natural. What was it like doing research for Lost Man? Because I think you went on tour with the Outback Policeman, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that was insane. That trip, it was amazing, really. And it was, I think that's one of the times when I really thought, like, I'm really lucky to have this job, because it means I get to go and do these kind of trips and things that I never would do, just for a personal level. So for the Lost Man, that was set in Outback Queensland, which the Outback is actually a specific geographic region of Australia. I know often especially in kind of reviews of the books and things, people refer to my books being like Outback Noir and stuff, but actually none of them, except for The Lost Man, is set in the Outback. There's actually, when you're driving there's actually signs that say "Welcome to the Outback" and things. It's only one part of Australia. So this was true Outback, and yeah, it was an absolute mission to get there. I had to kind of fly to Brisbane and then fly to like a really small town on this kind of regional kind of tiny aircraft, where I met this. I'd arranged to meet up with this retired cop called Neil McShane, who had worked in a town called Birdsville, which has about, I think the population is like 100 people. It overspread over this massive area, and he was the only cop there for 10 years, where he single-handedly policed an area the size of the UK, all on his own for a decade. So he had, as you can imagine, a few stories to tell, and he kind of drove me across the Outback. We drove for, I think, 15 hours, saw 10 cars or something that whole time, to Birdsville, and then went out on some of these cattle stations and saw their kitchen stores, and they look like corner shops because they've got so many supplies. And the kind of the one nurse in town took me out in the ambulance, and it was really interesting. It was very, it was a fascinating experience.
I can't imagine what you'd have to do to get all the survival kit for something like that when you get lost in an area that large.
Yeah, and I think that's something I'm always. That's the reason why I kind of do try and do these on the ground visits. So when I'm working on the books, I have an idea and I do a lot of research as much as I can from home, like kind of speaking to people on the phone and reading memoirs and looking at pictures and things, so that I get a first draft down. And then that's the point at which then I try and go on the research trip, because then I kind of know where the gaps in my knowledge are, and there's still enough time and flexibility so that I can adjust things as needed when I learn new things, which I always do. So, for example, for this one, for the survivors, I went to Tasmania, which was a lot easier to get to, I have to say. That was a very short sort of plane ride. But I knew I wanted the characters to be able to scuba dive, because Tasmania has 1,000 shipwrecks around its coastline. But I'm not a scuba diver myself, and I don't know enough about it to fake it in the book. So I arranged to go diving with one of these companies that operates around one of their the shipwrecks, and just kind of get that firsthand experience that, again, hopefully then you can kind of weave it through the story.
What was it like to scuba dive? Because I've always wondered what that'd be like. I've seen it in pubs and things, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those. I think it's one of those sports. It's either for you or it's not for you. I have to say it wasn't for me particularly. Like, I found it really. I have done it once before in a kind of real touristy way up at in the Great Barrier Reef, but this was very different. This was kind of cold water. It was kind of rougher seas. It was like a very different experience from like kind of the tropical water of Queensland. And it was interesting. Like, I learned a lot from it, and I could see. I think what I was looking for, I could see why the characters would enjoy it and why they would get a lot out of it. And I got that kind of firsthand, I guess, the kind of tactile experience of feeling what the water was like and what kind of equipment you have to wear and things. But I have to say, it was a huge like mental. I just had to think, to remind myself to breathe through the apparatus and not kind of think too hard about how deep you are as well. So yeah, it was interesting. It's not something I do again personally, but I can see why people enjoy it.
I could just imagine what the temperature of the water was like. Was it warm or just cold?
No, it was freezing. It was really cold, but they have such they have such kind of good like cold weather suits, like wetsuits, that you couldn't feel the temperature at all. So yeah, I'm not sure. It was bizarre. Like, as you feel like it should be cold, you can see that you can kind of tell the water's cold, but you don't feel cold. It was, again, that was quite a surreal experience too.
Yeah. I was thinking about the the nature of the research, and you said about memoirs. What um, is the useful things you've found from reading memoirs, and does that compile a lot of your research?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of it sort of does and it doesn't. It honestly depends a bit on, you sometimes you get lucky with, research you do, and sometimes you don't. You use loads of it, and sometimes you don't use any of it. Um, and I mean, for example, for the Lost Man, I read a lot of memoirs of people who had grown up in this town, where Birdsville, where I kind of fictionalized like so I fictionalized the location of the setting in The Lost Man, but geographically it was very close to kind of Birdsville in terms of weather and the kind of the sort of structure of the population and things. And that was really useful. I mean, just I think that gave me a really good insight into exactly how dangerous it is. Like I think I knew how hot it gets, and I knew that your car can get bogs and things, but I hadn't quite appreciated sort of how deadly it is, and how people get they get into trouble really really quickly, and it's really difficult to get yourself out of it unless someone happens to come along and you can get help. And I remember little things. I mean, like the dry. I remember reading a blog actually from just a sort of a mum who kind of used to blog about her life with her kids, and her mentioning how the pictures that the kids drew at school were always really sad. Where the kids were really struggling with the drought, and so that was kind of reflected in their artwork, and that was a detail that I thought really struck me, and that was something that I did end up including in the book, because I just think it just shows like the ripple effects of how things impact so many people in different ways.
Yeah, when I first started reading The Dry, it was actually on tour going somewhere. What do you read when you go on tour and things to relax?
Yeah, it kind of depends what part of the writing cycle I'm in. If I'm actually like right deep in the writing cycle, actually the reading really goes on the back burner, because I find it quite hard to kind of take myself out of the story I'm trying to write and fully focus on something else. Um, but then in my sort of downtime, like I actually don't read that much crime fiction at the moment. I think, again, because I sort of spend a lot of my professional working life immersed in that. I like to kind of um, have a bit of a break and read other things. Having said that, I am quite like, I'm a bit of a sucker for kind of a good kind of blockbuster. So I do like all the kind of the crime writers that everybody else likes, the sort of the bestseller ones, like Lee Child and Val McDermid and all those ones, who have kind of you know what you're getting, and they don't disappoint. So I do like to turn to them as well.
Are there any Australian writers that the UK members of the group might not have heard of that you'd recommend to us?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of books that I sort of do recommend that you may not have. I'm not sure how many of you guys would have come across them. So they're not. And neither of them are actually straight crime thrillers. But I think, if you like crime thrillers, you find them both quite interesting. The first one is for people who, if you like true crime, um, which I have to say I'm not a huge fan of, but this one was really interesting because it was really sensitively done. This book by Helen Garner, who's a former journalist, actually probably still working journalist, actually. And the book's called This House of Grief. And she followed there was a sort of this tragic court case involving a father and his family, and she followed the court case right from the start all the way through the appeals and through the whole process in a really sort of forensic, balanced way. And she kind of adds this sort of fictional sort of style of writing to hard facts. So it's very readable and it's really moving. And I think it sort of kind of really drove home to me when you read about these cases in the paper or whatever, how they are real people, and how how huge and lasting the impact is. So that's Helen Garner, This House of Grief, and the other one is also more commonly classed as kind of literary fiction, but I thought it was really gripping in a kind of thriller mystery kind of way, and that's called The Natural Way of Things by Charlotte Wood, and that is about a group of young women who wake up sort of to find themselves kind of groggy and drugged in this remote sort of farmland in the middle of nowhere in Australia. And this isn't a spoiler; they work this out very, very quickly. But they've all been quite high-profile accusers, accusing rich, powerful men, CEOs, sportsmen, etc., of sexual assault. And they all find themselves kind of in this one place, and are not quite sure how or why that exactly how this has all happened to them. And so that's a really interesting book as well. So that's The Natural Way of Things by Charlotte Wood.
And CEOs and corporate world was important for the Aaron thought when I was just read, because that was about a corporate retreat that went slightly wrong. What was the idea behind that?
Yeah, I mean, so in Force of Nature, you've got a group of 5 women who go on a corporate retreat in the sort of dense Australian bushland. And after a few days, only 4 of them come out. And the question is, what's happened to the 5th member of the party? I think, I wanted to, after writing about The Dry, which was kind of agricultural kind of part of the country, I wanted to do something in a different landscape. So I wanted to do bushland. I thought that's a really kind of evocative setting. It's very dense. It's very easy for things, again, to go wrong out there. And I just really like the idea of the kind of how relationships can shift, and the power balance shifts when people are taken out of their comfort zone. So you've got a group of colleagues who in the office, it's very the hierarchy is very clear, and the person with the glass corner office is the boss, and the person who makes the coffees is bottom of the pecking order. And then you get out into the natural landscape where there's not a lot of comfort or help, and suddenly it becomes less about who has the biggest salary, and suddenly it becomes more about who's the fittest person and who can read the maps best, and that the power struggle changes depending on who's got the skills that are needed at that moment. So that was something I found quite interesting writing that book.
It's always interesting to read about character dynamics, but how did that develop for you when you first wrote The Dry? Because with that being your first book, character dynamics must have been more difficult with it being the first one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the writing style does change over the course. So not the writing style, but more the process, I guess, gets refined over the course of 4 books. So now, I have a really kind of quite streamlined process where I know how, if I do certain things in a certain order, that will help me really get those foundations solid, and have the plot kind of really clear in my mind, and then I can sort of focus on executing in the best possible way in terms of the writing and, I guess, the creative elements. But you don't know any of that when you're writing your first book, so it is a bit more trial and error. And I think, I learned a lot of things writing that book that have really helped shape the way I approach books now. In terms of, I think, I one of the things I did then that I still do now is I still sort of, I plan things out really, really well. I kind of divide things into manageable sections so that I know if I do a section every day, I know when I kind of get to the end of that draft. And I think one of the things I really learned about, specifically you asked about the characters, is not to force things. So there were scenes in The Dry that I maybe rewrote, sort of 10 or more times. And every time I sit down, I'd start a new version of the chapter. And it kind of got to the point where I realized, like, I was trying to push something uphill that this was not right for the book, and that's why it wasn't working, because it wasn't the right scene or the characters weren't interacting properly. So I would actually, what I did then, I just actually ditched that scene and I just got rid of that chapter and I just moved on to the next one. And I thought I can always add it back in if I need to at the end, but I never did, and I think that's something that I've really learned. If it feels forced, or if you're struggling, if you're struggling with it, you really cannot get the scene right, maybe examine if it does feel forced, and if it's because it's not the right scene for the book at all, or particularly maybe at that point.
When you were starting off the writing journey, what what was the first stage for you?
For me, so I was a print journalist for 13 years before I started to write The Dry, and I'd wanted to write a book for a really long time. But I think, like, a lot of people, I'd just never been able to kind of motivate myself to really put in the effort and the time that was needed. I was working full time. Um, I felt like it was a lot of effort for a really uncertain reward. You can spend months and months, years and years writing a book that may never get published, and that I found that really off-putting, because I didn't really think I could do it. I didn't really know how to write a book. Um, so finally, I think the thing that changed for me was that I realized that I did really just want to write a book, and if that was more important to me than the end result and seeing it published. I just wanted to write a book for my own satisfaction, so I could feel like I'd done it and I'd kind of achieved this goal that I'd had since I was a child. So and actually that was a really freeing experience for me. If you're struggling to write your own novel, if you can kind of try and get yourself into that headspace where it has to be worth it just for itself, because the benefit of that was I was able to kind of let go of any of the fears about, will anybody like it? Will they read it? Will it get published? Because I kind of assumed they wouldn't. And I thought I'll just do it as a learning exercise, and I'm just going to write the kind of book I want to write. And I don't care if, people aren't currently like buying Australian crime fiction. I don't care if people, might think having 2 plot lines is too much for a debut novel. I'm just going to write the kind of book that I want to write. It's something I'd like to read, and it doesn't matter. It probably won't get published, but I'll learn from it next time, and maybe the next one could get published. And so that was kind of the mental sort of breakthrough I had, I guess. And once I sort of decided that, it suddenly became just really a hobby. I enjoying working on it, and I made myself kind of do an hour after work every day. I'd stay in my work clothes and do an hour and kind of build up that routine. And then, you start to see your work build up, and then it becomes, you think, well, I've done so much, I may as well try and continue. And it just becomes this kind of positive cycle, I guess. But that was sort of the catalyst to get me there in the first place.
Um, Being a print journalist to start with, did you take any of the techniques from that into your writing?
Yeah, I took loads of them. I mean, the on a sort of like the writing side, I guess, be able to kind of express yourself clearly on paper. I think, as a journalist, there's this sort of rule that, journalists should never own a thesaurus, because you should, whatever the first word you think of is probably the simplest and clearest word to use. So, things like that, which I think is something I actually kind of incorporate into the writing style as well. I think also another thing we were always taught was to assume that people wouldn't read to the end of your article. They get distracted, they watch TV, they want to read something else. They'll read the sort of the start and the first couple of sentences, and they'll move on. So your job is to try and engage them fast and keep them engaged as long as possible. So that's definitely something I really, especially when I was writing The Dry, I was really conscious of. So, how can I kind of start this chapter in a way that's going to pull people in, and then end it in a way that's going to make them want to just turn the page and start a little bit of the next chapter and then draw them into that one. So that's something that I spend like a long time planning. Like I would spend a long time kind of thinking how the chapters will start and end to kind of get that, I suppose, that cliffhanger feel where you just think, oh, I'll just read a couple of pages more.
We've got a few audience questions along the side. I'm just going to get my assistant to read them for you because I know you're on your phone today and can't see them at sight. So
Okay, yeah.
I think this. I'm not read them.
Okay, there's one from Samantha Brownlee. Why did you decide to move from journalism to writing books?
We've got one from Samantha Brownlee. Why did you decide to move from journalism to writing books?
Yeah, thank you. So I actually always wanted to write books, but out of you know, I liked writing the most. I liked writing, and I wanted to. I didn't think writing books seemed like a very kind of realistic way to, make for a career. So out of university, I went into journalism because it would allow me to write on a professional level and get paid for it. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed being a journalist for a long time, and I enjoyed the newsrooms, and I enjoyed really actually the best part was getting out to speak to people and listening to their stories and finding out more about them, I guess, at the highs and lows in their lives. And then, but I always wanted to write a book, but it never occurred to me that I would be able to kind of become like a professional author. So then I wrote The Dry, and then The Dry just kind of, took off really right from, when it was kind of getting shipped around publishers, and it became apparent to me that I was going to get an ongoing contract and I was going to be able to leave my day job really. So I knew I couldn't do both things well. I didn't have the time to kind of fully focus on both things, and I couldn't, begin to kind of pass up the opportunity to be a professional author. So, a little bit of me was sad to leave journalism, but I have to say I've actually honestly never looked back.
I think we've got a couple more.
There's one more.
Yeah.
How did it feel when Reese Witherspoon bought the movie rights for The Drive? Was that a long process?
But we'll be asked whether when Reese Witherspoon bought the rights to The Dry, was it a long process for the film to be made?
Yeah, so that got optioned. The Dry got optioned in I think it was August 2015. So I wrote a book in 2014, and then in early 2015, it won an unpublished manuscript prize, and I got my agents, and I started getting publishers immediately interested. And as part of that, my agency has a guy who specializes in like film rights, and he has worked with Australian films before, and he got it in front of actually a woman called Bruna Papandreou, who was Reese Witherspoon's partner at the time with doing, like I mentioned, Big Little Lies. So he got it in front of them, thinking that with the Australian connection, they might be interested, and they were. So they optioned that straight away before it was published. That was August 2015. And then I was still going through the editing process with the publishers. The book didn't even come out in Australia till the following year, till 2016. And then, so the film, so option 2015, it was filmed early 2019 here in Australia. And I know that because I got to be an extra in it. I'm in the funeral scene, sitting in the second row of the church, playing a grieving townsperson. When you get a chance to see it, check out the exceptional extras acting there. And then it was completed at the end of 2019, which is when I saw it for the first time. Then it was due for release last year, 2020. And then that was kind of delayed, a bunch of times. And then it finally came out New Year's Day this year. So it was about, I guess, like 5 years from option to release, which sounds like a long time, but is apparently exceptionally fast for a film.
It has been really fascinating learning about the different kinds of style you've used in all 5 of your books. Could you tell us what's next for you, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'll be starting it. So I'm kind of starting a new book now. I spend quite a lot of time away from the computer thinking about ideas and kind of mulling things over and just sort of trying things on for size, I guess, and seeing what feels right. Like I said, I have got this idea for another book with Aaron Falk in it. It's always been about finding that idea that I think would really suit him, and I have got an idea that I think stands up quite well for him. So I'm sort of exploring that at the moment. And what I'll do, I'll think about that for quite a long time, and I'll sort of plan out different sort of scenarios before I kind of fully commit to whether that's the idea I'm going to go for. And then once I do decide on what idea I'm going to go for, then I plan it out fully, and then I spent ages planning it out, and then I'll ideally write it quite quickly once the plan is completely completely in place. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. So I think, it's definitely safe to say it'll be another Australian mystery, similar sort of style and tone and feel to the other 4 books. But in terms of kind of the location and the specifics around the characters, that's something I'm still mulling over.
Given that you spent quite a few years in the UK, have you ever considered writing a book based in the UK?
I haven't so far, mainly because I find it really important part of the process to kind of go out, and do these kind of on location visits. I think has been a really crucial part for me so far. So I think if I were to set it in the UK, there'd have to be a specific reason. Like, I think there'd have to be a reason why I had a plot that would really lend itself specifically to the UK. Having said that, if I did have an idea that I thought this would never work in Australia, this has to be set over there, like, I'd absolutely consider that. I think it's important to kind of if you have a good idea, let the good ideas rise to the surface, and then do everything you can to support that idea, not rather be bound into, I must write about a certain region or a certain character. Just do what you need to tell that idea the best way you can.
We met 18 months ago in Nottingham when you were on a UK tour for The Lost Man. What was it like being in the UK again?
Yeah, I mean, so nice. I mean, my parents and my sister still live over in the UK, and a lot of my extended family. So I mean, sort of in what feels like a past life now, but I used to come back fairly regularly, maybe every other year, to sort of see them. So that visit was book based. Was there to kind of tour around, and thank you to anybody who's sort of watching this who came to one of those events. It was a really fun tour to do, and gets a chance to kind of meet readers over there. I have to say, I feel pretty lucky, because that was obviously the last time I got to go for ages, and I mean, who knows when the next opportunity will be. So yeah, I have very sort of fond memories, and I love being in the UK. I love kind of, again, like, just seeing kind of different books get promoted in different ways. So you come across, again, new authors and things that I might have missed, just from being out here. So it's always really fun.
You were shortlisted for the Thesis Prize last year, with it being Zoomed live. What was it like talking about your book over Zoom with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, that was really great. The Lost Man was so shortlisted for the Thixton's, I think, Crown Novel of the Year, I think, is the title, which was really, I mean, I was honoured. That was really exciting, and it's really nice, I guess, when your book is recognised by people who read a lot of that type of fiction. So you feel like they kind of come to it with a knowledge and the kind of background understanding of the other books in the market. So to be selected is really, like, it is really something special. It's a bit of a shame, could have been there in person for that one, for obvious reasons. But it was, having said that, though, it was really, it was great to kind of have the chance still to be part of it, despite being all the way over here. And I know, I mean, Adrian McKinsey, who ended up winning for The Chain, I mean, I think at the time he was zooming in from the States, so he I guess he wouldn't have been there either. So if it had been in person. So that was a really fun event.
It was really interesting to see you on a panel with Craig Sisterton. What was it like being in front of the large audience at Theakston's that year doing that?
Yeah, I mean, so that was, it's like the festival at Harrogate is a, as so many of you, I guess, would know, like, is a really like fun festival. So it's fun to be part of it. And I think it was really nice to kind of be on a panel talking about Australian and New Zealand fiction along with, the other authors. And, it's I think one of the best things, I guess, about Harrogate is the way the audience is so kind of open, I think, to discovering kind of they want to hear about the kind of the books and authors, and they're very sort of I suppose like focused on the kind of writing that I like to do. So it's really nice. Yeah, it's really nice to be part of that. That festival. I think every time I've been.
We've only got two minutes left, so I'm going to go to the final audience question, which I'm just like.
Where in Manchester were you born?
We've got one asking where in Manchester were you born. Someone's been doing Google research, I think.
Yeah, I was born in Didsbury. Actually, I'm not sure if I was born there. That's where I lived though with my family until I was 8. Over the couple of years, we actually moved to the States for a couple of years in there as well. But yeah, I lived there with my family till I was 8, and then we left to move to Australia, and then I actually never really went back to Manchester. I've still got some extended family there, but after that, then I lived in Hampshire and went to university in Kent, and then my family live in North Yorkshire now. So although I guess I still feel very sort of Manchester will have a special place in my heart. It's not somewhere that I've spent a lot of time as an adult, other than going and visiting relatives occasionally. But I do really enjoy where we go.
It's really been really great to talk to you for an hour, because I know we've interviewed before when I did my website, but it's really been great to learn about all your books, and hope to read your next one when that comes out. Thank you so much, Jane, for being with us this morning.
No, thank you so much for having me on, and hi everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in and watching this. And I hope I know you're in lockdown at the moment. I know how hard it is. So thinking of you, and I hope things get a little bit better this year for you all.
Thank you, Jane. It's been great.
Thanks.